We see them right in the context of their living space as they're hiding, or they're trying to leave, or they're rescuing their children.
Archaeology often takes us to unexpected places, uncovering hidden secrets from the past. But not every discovery brings wonder.
Everything seemed perfectly preserved. One of the most powerful experiences I've had.
Some reveal heartbreak, tragedy, and loss frozen in time. From ancient mass graves to haunting remains of lives lost to disaster, these artifacts carry tales of suffering that history tried to forget. Join us as we uncover history's darkest truths discovered by archaeologists. Number 20. Sewer of Babies. Under the streets of Ashkelon, Israel, archaeologists made a discovery that sent shivers down their spines. They were digging through an ancient Roman sewer beneath a bathhouse, expecting nothing more than old trash. But instead, they found hundreds of tiny bones, remains of newborn babies. At first, they thought these might be the remains of female infants, reflecting the Roman preference for male children. But when DNA tests were done, the results shocked everyone. Most of the babies were boys. This raised a chilling question. Why would baby boys, considered more valuable in Roman times, be discarded in such a way? One idea was that the bathhouse above wasn't just a place for bathing. Some researchers believe it may have also been a brothel. The newborns might have been the unwanted children of workers there, discarded because they couldn't be cared for. But this theory also had holes. Historical records show that Roman women, especially those in difficult jobs, often used herbal remedies to avoid pregnancies. If that's true, why were there so many infants? Adding to the mystery, archaeologists found oil lamps with mythological and erotic designs in the same area. Were these lamps linked to the bathhouse? Did they hint at its hidden purpose? The discovery raises more questions than answers. How did these babies end up here? And what does it say about life in ancient Rome? To this day, the sewer of babies remains one of archaeology's most heartbreaking and puzzling finds. Number 19. The Children of Llullaillaco. High in the icy peaks of the Andes Mountains, a haunting secret lay hidden for centuries. In 1999, archaeologist Johann Reinhard and his team braved the freezing winds and thin air of Mount Llullaillaco, a dormant volcano nearly 20,000 feet above sea level. What they found was unforgettable. 3 perfectly preserved mummies of children sacrificed by the Inca Empire over 500 years ago. The children, a 13-year-old girl, a 6-year-old girl, and a 7-year-old boy, were buried in a stone chamber near the summit. The frigid temperatures and dry air kept their bodies and even their clothing remarkably intact. These were no ordinary burials. The children had been chosen for a ritual called capacocha, a ceremony meant to honor the gods and protect the Inca people during crises like droughts or the death of an emperor. The eldest, nicknamed La Doncella, or the Maiden, sat cross-legged as if peacefully asleep, her braided hair and ceremonial clothing untouched by time. Scientists found traces of coca leaves and alcohol in her system, likely used to calm her before the end. Beside her lay La Niña del Rayo, the younger girl struck by lightning after death, and El Niño, the boy who may have died more violently, with ropes tied around him and blood on his clothes. Today, these mummies are preserved at the Museum of High-Altitude Archaeology in Argentina, where they continue to tell their tragic and fascinating story of devotion, sacrifice, and an ancient civilization's unshakable faith in its gods. Number 18. Final Embrace. In the heart of China's Qinghai province, an ancient tragedy lay hidden for over 4,000 years. Archaeologists uncovering the ruins of a Bronze Age settlement called Llullaillaco, often compared to Pompeii, stumbled upon a scene that left them speechless. A mother and child locked in a final embrace. Their skeletal remains, perfectly preserved beneath layers of mud, tell a story of love and loss that echoes through the centuries. Around 2,000 years before the birth of Christ, a powerful earthquake struck the region, triggering a catastrophic mudslide. The people of Llullaillaco had little time to react as the torrent of mud swallowed their homes and lives. Among the remains, the mother's arms wrapped tightly around her child, a heartbreaking attempt to shield her little one from the unstoppable force of nature. The Llullaillaco site, located along the Upper Yellow River, was home to the Chigia culture, an early civilization known for its pottery and tools. As researchers explored the ruins, they found evidence of entire families trapped in their homes, caught in the disaster's path. The preserved remains of the mother and child offer a rare glimpse into the terrifying final moments of these ancient people. Number 17. Buried alive. Imagine waking up in a dark, tight space with no way out, trapped and helpless. That's what researchers believe happened to a young woman in ancient China, whose final moments were horrifying. Found in a small, tightly sealed coffin, her body twisted and eyes wide open in fear, she tells a chilling story of being buried alive. At just 25 years old, this woman had recently given birth. But something went wrong. Her placenta wasn't fully removed, causing severe internal bleeding. Her family, unaware of the danger, mistakenly thought she had passed away. In their rush to bury her according to tradition, they placed her in a coffin that was too small for her to sit up in. Tragically, she wasn't dead. When she woke up inside the coffin, panic set in. She realized she couldn't move or escape. In a desperate attempt to break free, she scratched and clawed at the coffin's walls. Researchers found scratch marks on her fingers and toes, showing how she fought to survive. The cloth lining inside the coffin was torn apart as she struggled, but it was no use. Her cries for help were muffled by the thick wood, and no one heard her desperate pleas. Sadly, after what must have been an agonizing ordeal, she succumbed to suffocation, exhaustion, and pain. Number 16. The Bogmen. In the mysterious bogs of northern Europe, ancient bodies have been discovered. These bodies, known as bogmen, have been preserved for over 2,000 years, offering us a rare glimpse into a darker time in history. One of the most famous bog bodies is the Tolland Man, found in Denmark in 1950. When he was discovered, his body was so well preserved that it looked like he had just died. His face, calm and peaceful, was almost haunting. But the truth behind his death was far from peaceful. Researchers believe he was sacrificed in a ritual to please ancient gods. His neck was tightly bound by a leather thong, suggesting that he was hanged before being placed in the bog. The bogs, with their spongy moss and stillness, were seen as sacred places by ancient people. They believed the bogs were the boundary between the living and the dead. Many others, like the Tolland Man, including bodies found in Ireland, were also victims of violent deaths. Some were beaten, mutilated, and bound before being left in the bogs as offerings. These gruesome discoveries reveal how belief, death, and violence were deeply connected in ancient rituals. Despite the violence they faced, these bodies were preserved in incredible detail, giving us an eerie connection to the past. The bogmen are not just ancient remains. They are the remains of a time when life and death were shaped by mysterious and spiritual beliefs. Number 15. Coffin birth. In the small town of Imola, Italy, archaeologists made an unsettling discovery that left them baffled. In 2002, they unearthed the grave of a woman from the 7th or 8th century who had tragically passed away just 2 weeks before her baby was due. But what they found was far from ordinary. The tiny remains of her unborn child were found near her legs. This strange event is known as a coffin birth, a rare occurrence where the fetus is expelled from the mother's body after death. But this wasn't the only mystery. The woman's skull had a hole in it, leading scientists to believe she had undergone a medical procedure called trepanation. This procedure involved drilling or scraping the skull, typically used in ancient times, to treat illnesses like fevers or seizures. Sadly, the woman might have died from complications related to this surgery or from an illness that led to the procedure. What makes this phenomenon even stranger is how the baby was expelled. After death, the body begins to decompose, and as gas builds up in the abdomen, pressure can cause the fetus to be pushed out. This happens in the first few days after death, which is why the baby was born, even though the woman had already passed. Number 14. Eruption victims of Pompeii. In 79 AD, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius changed the lives of the people in Pompeii forever. The volcano erupted so suddenly and violently that it buried the entire city in ash, trapping its inhabitants in their final moments. This tragedy left behind haunting stories frozen in time, waiting to be uncovered. In 2020, archaeologists discovered a villa just outside Pompeii. The villa survived the first eruption, but the second blast the next day was too powerful. Inside, they found two bodies, a wealthy man and his slave. Both were frozen in a terrifying moment, their hands and feet tightly clenched, as though they were trying to escape. They had believed they were safe, only to be overtaken by the deadly eruption. Their bodies, preserved by the volcanic ash, told a story of fear and desperation. Pompeii and the nearby city of Herculaneum hold many such stories. Thousands of years of excavations have revealed not only buildings and artifacts, but the human remains of those who could not escape. Some of them were poor and had no place to go, while others were trapped as they waited for boats that never arrived. The eruption killed in many ways. Toxic gases suffocated some, falling debris crushed others, and the intense heat of the pyroclastic cloud killed many instantly. Number 13. Tower of Skulls. The Huitzilopochtli, or Tower of Skulls, was discovered in 2015, revealing a gruesome yet fascinating piece of history. This towering structure of over 600 human skulls, carefully arranged in circular layers, stood in the heart of the ancient Aztec city of Tenochtitlan, near the Templo Mayor. It wasn't just a symbol of conquest, but a part of a complex religious ritual. For the Aztecs, human sacrifice was believed to be necessary to appease their gods, particularly Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun. The skulls in the tower were not only those of warriors, as was once thought. Archaeologists were surprised to find that many of the skulls belonged to women and even children. These individuals, captured during battles or raids, were considered sacred gifts to the gods. They were sacrificed to ensure the survival of the universe. The skulls were carefully arranged using lime, forming rings and intricate patterns. The tower itself was part of a much larger structure, with smaller racks of skulls eventually transferred to the tower to elevate their religious importance. Excavations are ongoing, and with each new layer uncovered, more details of this ancient practice come to light. Number 12. The Franklin Expedition. In the year 1845, Sir John Franklin led a daring expedition to find the Northwest Passage, a shortcut for ships through the icy waters of Canada. His journey seemed promising. Franklin, along with his experienced officers, Francis Crozier and James Fitzjames, sailed aboard two ships, the HMS Erebus and HMS Terror. The ships were specially built for the Arctic, with reinforced bows to withstand ice, steam engines, and even steam heating systems to keep the crew warm. They carried supplies, including cattle, pigs, and a 3-year stock of canned foods. But soon after setting sail from Britain, the expedition vanished. The ships made a stop in Greenland, and in July of 1845, 2 whaling ships spotted them in Baffin Bay, Canada. After that, no one saw the Erebus or Terror again. For years, the world heard nothing from Franklin and his crew. In 1848, Lady Jane Franklin, Sir John's wife, convinced the British government to launch an extensive search. Despite their efforts, only scattered artifacts and a few human remains were found. The crew had suffered from starvation, scurvy, and even lead poisoning, possibly from the canned food. Some of the bones showed signs of cannibalism. It wasn't until the 21st century that the ships were finally found, almost 170 years later. In 2014, the Erebus was discovered, and 2 years later, the Terror was found in the Arctic waters near King William Island. These discoveries, along with Inuit oral histories, helped unravel the mystery of the lost expedition. Number 11. Australia's Murder Island. In 1629, the Batavia, a Dutch ship, set sail with 341 people on board, heading to what is now Indonesia. But tragedy struck when the ship ran into a reef near Beacon Island, off Australia's west coast. Many passengers drowned as they tried to swim to shore. Stranded on the island without fresh water, the captain, Francisco Pelsaert, sailed off in search of help, leaving behind a crew desperate for survival. While the captain was gone, Geronimus Cornelis, the ship's junior merchant, took control. He and a group of men mutinied, leading to one of the bloodiest chapters in Australian history. Over the next few months, Cornelis and his followers killed many of the survivors in a violent attempt to seize control of the island. Of the 341 who had boarded the Batavia, only 122 survived. Fast forward to 2014, forensic anthropologist Daniel Franklin was on Beacon Island, hoping to find a missing skeleton that had been buried for centuries. The skeleton belonged to one of those caught in the violence. Franklin had been searching for this elusive person ever since a skull had been found there in the 1960s. After days of digging, he finally struck gold. On his last day, he uncovered the bones of a human leg, finally solving a 4-century-old mystery. Number 10. Eternal Kiss. In 1972, archaeologists uncovered a remarkable and mysterious discovery at the ancient ruins of Tepe Hasanlu in Iran. Deep in the ruins of a once thriving city, they found 2 skeletons locked in a tender embrace, as if sharing a final kiss. The scene was so powerful and intimate that it sparked the imagination of many, leading people to call them the Hasanlu lovers. These skeletons were discovered in what used to be a grain storage bin, likely used by the 2 men to hide from a violent attack on their city around 800 years before the Common Era. The city, known as Tepe Hasanlu, had been destroyed in a brutal assault by the Urartu kingdom. As the fire raged through the city, the 2 men perished, likely from asphyxiation due to the thick smoke surrounding them. The tragedy of their deaths, caught in their final moments together, made this discovery hauntingly beautiful. At first, it was believed that one of the skeletons belonged to a man and the other to a woman, suggesting a romantic relationship. But DNA analysis later revealed a surprising twist. Both individuals were male. The younger man, aged between 19 and 22, lay on his back, while the older one, between 30 and 35, gently touched his cheek. Their true relationship remains a mystery. Number 9. Ice Princess of Siberia. In 1993, a groundbreaking discovery was made in the frozen Ukok Plateau of Siberia. The mummified remains of a woman thought to be over 2,500 years old were uncovered by Russian archaeologists. This mysterious woman, known as the Ice Maiden or the Ukok Princess, would soon become one of the most significant finds in archaeological history. The discovery happened when a team of scientists, led by Dr. Natalia Polosmak, was called to investigate after reports of a grave robbery. When they arrived, they found a massive block of ice that, when melted, revealed the remarkably preserved body of a young woman, believed to be around 25 years old. Her body, covered in intricate tattoos, revealed that she was a member of the Paziric people, a nomadic tribe that lived more than 2,500 years ago in the Altai Mountains. The Ice Maiden's tomb contained more than just her mummified remains. 6 horses, positioned around her in a circle, were found, symbolizing her high status. But there were signs of tragedy, too. The horses had been executed, and researchers discovered a feast of fatty mutton nearby, preserved by the cold. The woman's burial rituals seemed to reflect her important role in her community. Though the cause of her death remained a mystery for years, modern research suggests that she may have suffered from breast cancer, with evidence found in scans of her body. Number 8. Mass grave of headless Vikings. In June of 2009, archaeologists digging near Weymouth in Dorset, England, stumbled upon a shocking discovery. While preparing for a new road project, they uncovered a mass grave that held the remains of 54 dismembered Vikings. The pit, found in a former Roman quarry, was unlike anything they had seen before. Among the bones, there were 51 skulls piled to one side, each one a silent reminder of a violent past. Through careful study, scientists determined that these men were Scandinavian Vikings, and the gruesome manner of their deaths was connected to the bitter conflict between the Vikings and the local Anglo-Saxons. It's believed that these men were executed sometime between the years 970 and 1025, during a period when Viking raids were common. The exact cause of their deaths remains a mystery, but one theory suggests they were captured during a raid and later killed as part of a wider effort to rid England of Viking invaders. The Viking burial at Ridgeway Hill is considered extremely rare for its size and historical significance. Normally, mass graves from this time are hard to find, making this discovery even more remarkable. Some experts even suggest that the fatal deaths could be linked to the St. Brice's Day massacre of the year 1002, when the Anglo-Saxons attempted to wipe out the Viking presence in their lands. Whatever the cause, the headless Vikings of Dorset continue to intrigue and puzzle historians to this day. Number 7. Sacrificial Pits of Shimao. In the remote region of Shanxi Province, China, an ancient city known as Shimao was once hidden beneath layers of history, waiting to be uncovered. For decades, villagers near the site thought the crumbling stone walls were remnants of the Great Wall. But when archaeologists started digging, they found something far more surprising. Not a wall, but a long-lost fortress city that had been hidden for over 4,000 years. Shimao, dating back to around 2300 BC, was much older than the Great Wall and the earliest known Chinese civilization. Surrounded by walls stretching for over 6 miles, the city housed an enormous step pyramid and a collection of intriguing murals and jade artifacts. The jade pieces, which were not local to the region, suggested that Shimao had connections with distant trade partners, as jade could only be found hundreds of miles away. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery was the sacrificial pits. Archaeologists found human skulls in these pits, a chilling reminder that human sacrifice was practiced here. The relief sculptures carved into the stone walls added to the mystery. Serpents, monsters, and strange half-human beasts, all symbols of power and otherworldly forces. Shimao's sudden abandonment remains a mystery, but its discovery is changing how historians view early Chinese civilization. Number 6. Ancient chemical warfare. In the year 1933, a groundbreaking discovery was made by archaeologist Robert Duil Dubuisson while excavating the ancient city of Dura Europos in Syria. What he uncovered was chilling. 19 Roman soldiers who appeared to have died instantly. Their bodies were scattered in a way that suggested they were fleeing from something terrifying. At the other end of the tunnel, there was one Persian soldier who seemed to be caught in the same deadly trap. What could have caused such a sudden, horrifying end for these soldiers? As Dubuisson investigated further, he found traces of sulfur and bitumen on the tunnel walls. These substances are typically used in explosives and fire, but in this case they hinted at something more sinister, an ancient form of chemical warfare. Later research by another archaeologist, Simon James, confirmed this theory. The Persians had released sulfurous gases into the tunnels, choking the Romans to death. The Romans, trapped in the narrow space, had no way to escape the deadly fumes. The deaths were swift and merciless. This discovery in Dura Europos is one of the earliest known examples of chemical warfare, showing that ancient civilizations were willing to go to terrifying lengths to win battles. Number 5. The Bound Mummy. Buried deep beneath the earth was a mummy that had been there for over 1,200 years. But what made this find even more fascinating wasn't just its age, it was the way the body was positioned. The mummy's hands were covering its face, almost as if it was hiding from something or trying to protect itself. This strange posture raised immediate questions. Why would someone be buried like this? The mystery deepened when researchers discovered that the body wasn't just lying there peacefully. It was tightly bound with rope, almost like it had been wrapped up for a reason. This unusual combination sparked all kinds of theories. Was this person being punished for something? Or perhaps it was part of an ancient ritual? Some experts thought that maybe the bindings were meant to prevent the person's spirit from coming back to haunt the living. Others believed it could be a form of punishment, especially if the person had committed a crime. Number 4. Vampire burial. In Poland, during the 17th century, a chilling discovery was made that seemed to confirm people's worst fears. Archaeologists uncovered the remains of a woman who had been buried unusually and frighteningly. At the time, the community believed that she was a vampire. To make sure she stayed buried, the villagers took extreme measures. A sickle was placed above her neck, positioned in such a way that if she tried to rise from the grave, it would slice through her throat. But that wasn't enough for the terrified locals. They went even further and locked her grave with a padlock, hoping that this would keep her from escaping and spreading terror. This burial was not a one-time event. During times when plagues or mysterious diseases would strike, communities would often point fingers at someone they didn't understand. They blamed them for the death and destruction, sometimes accusing them of being witches or vampires. People thought that these so-called creatures were responsible for the suffering. In other cases, archaeologists found bodies with large stones shoved into their mouths. The reason? To prevent the vampires from biting anyone if they somehow woke up. While the belief in vampires and witches is long gone, these discoveries show how fear and superstition can push people to do unimaginable things, all in an attempt to protect themselves from the unknown. Number 3. Shackled bones. In 2016, a discovery was made in an ancient Greek cemetery, where archaeologists uncovered the remains of about 80 people, their bones bound with iron shackles. The grave, which dates back to around 632 BC, tells a haunting story of a mass execution, but the mystery surrounding the burial raises even more questions. The bodies, found in the Phaleron Delta necropolis near Athens, were arranged strangely. Some were laid in neat rows, while others were piled on top of each other, their arms and legs twisted in unnatural positions. Even though these individuals were likely executed, the way they were buried showed respect, which was unusual for rebels or criminals in ancient times. The bodies, mostly of young, healthy people, were bound with their hands tied above their heads, suggesting they met a violent end. Archaeologists, including Dr. Stella Chrysoulaki, believe these individuals may have been part of a failed coup led by an Athenian noble named Cylon. In 632 BC, Cylon attempted to take over Athens with help from his powerful father-in-law, but the plot failed, and many of his supporters were executed. The discovery of these shackled bodies might be evidence of that tragic event, though scientists hope to confirm this theory through DNA testing. Regardless of the exact story, the discovery sheds light on the extreme lengths people went to during times of political unrest in ancient Greece. Number 2. Pit of Bones. Deep beneath the ancient soil of Spain's Atapuerca Mountains, an eerie discovery was made that has fascinated scientists for decades. In 1987, archaeologists stumbled upon a hidden cave that contained a vast collection of bones scattered in a large pit. These weren't just any bones. They belonged to some of the earliest humans in Europe, dating back over 400,000 years. The site, known as Cima de los Huesos, which translates to Pit of Bones, has since become one of the richest human fossil sites in the world. What made this discovery so chilling was what the archaeologists found when they pieced together a skull from the pile. It wasn't a natural death. This person had been brutally murdered. Deep fractures in the skull suggested they had been struck multiple times with a blunt object, possibly a stone axe. This revelation changed what scientists thought about early humans. It showed that, in addition to survival, early humans were capable of violence, even against one another. As more remains were uncovered, it became clear that at least 20 individuals had met a violent end in the pit. Some of these bones showed signs of trauma, further suggesting that life in prehistoric times was filled with danger and conflict. What's even more fascinating is that these people had physical traits that were starting to resemble Neanderthals, though their skulls were not fully developed like those of later Neanderthals. Number 1. A prison for witches. In the heart of Scotland is a reminder of a dark chapter in history. St. Mary's Chapel, once a sacred place of worship, became a prison for suspected witches during the 16th century. At a time when fear of witchcraft spread through the land, this building turned into a grim holding cell where accused women and men were locked away, awaiting their fate. In the year 1597, the people of Scotland were gripped by panic. They believed witches had the power to curse crops, harm animals, and even kill children. The town of Aberdeen saw 31 witch trials that year alone. The accused were often dragged to places like St. Mary's Chapel, where they were chained to iron rings in the walls, unable to escape their fate. The fear of witches was so strong that neighbors would imprison their own, certain that witches could still cast spells, even from behind bars. The people of Scotland were heavily influenced by the church, which saw witchcraft as a sin. Suspects were interrogated and often tortured until they confessed. Between 1550 and 1700, nearly 4,000 people were accused of witchcraft, most of them. And that's all for today. Thanks for watching.